amigos y bienvenidos a este vuestro programa Dos gatos en tierra de perros. Un podcast de actualidad donde analizamos de manera fáctica y neutral las noticias más relevantes de la política y cultura norteamericana.
Hola, soy Joe Magaja. Gracias amigos por estar conmigo otra vez para otro episodio de Dos gatos en tierra de perros. Este va a ser otro episodio en inglés porque la invitada prefiere que sea en inglés que no sabe español. Es otra candidata para la Asamblea de California, Jessica Martinez. So now I'm going to switch to English. Welcome, Jessica.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for coming on. Now, I want to hear about your candidacy for assembly, but I'd like to hear a little bit about you first. Could you tell us about where you come from, what your childhood was like, and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think my life has been kind of unusual in the fact that I grew up, well, which is not unusual, in Los Angeles. That's where I'm from, and but I was adopted at birth, and so I never met my birth family or anything like that. And I always considered, of course, my adoptive parents my parents. But just recently, in fact, it was kind of interesting. I got an email from somebody who said that they found me and I'm supposedly part of their family. I don't know. I haven't, I responded, and like kind of well, we'll see what happens kind of a thing, but yeah, so I still have my mom around. She's 96 years old, and of course, one of the members of the greatest generation that ever lived. And my father, actually today is the anniversary of his death. He passed away um, many years ago when I was in my 20s. I won't say how many years ago that was because I don't know how old I am, but anyway, um, yeah, so my father, who very, very dear to me, and I was his little girl, and he was a fine man, uh that did a lot for our family, worked very, very hard. He owned a business, actually several businesses, and then he was kind of given a choice by the adoption agencies, because when you adopt a child, you have to show definite income. And he owned a deli in East Los Angeles, right there, I believe, on Brooklyn. And so they basically, my father had to get a job where he could show, this is my income. And so he did. But I think my dad was a businessman. He could sell anybody anything. And so, I think for his own sake, he would have done much better just continuing in his own business, under his own steam. And in fact, he went to work for, what is it, Ador? No, back then it was Foremost McKesson. And that was, I believe it was on Atlantic Boulevard in like in Bell or something like that. But anyway, it was over there. And so he started working there and worked there for many, many years until he actually he serviced most of the years a lot of Boyle Heights in East LA, but he worked for as a milkman. And so he eventually he bought his own truck, and then he bought another truck, and then he had, I believe, a total of 3 trucks. And he helped other people, a couple of people from my cousins who were actually from Mexico. He allowed them to get come over to the United States and then get started in their own business. So eventually when he retired, he sold the business to my cousin. And so it supported us, and he helped a lot of people. I remember my mom was not, I shouldn't say angry, But sometimes she would get annoyed with the fact that he would, loan people money, or, and they would burn him, and
Yeah.
it
That
happens a
happens.
lot. But he helped a lot of people
Mhm.
while he did that. And I remember my mom told me this story about how the company, before he went independent and purchased his own, I guess, customers, his route or whatever it is, that he was given a choice of, you can either stop extending credit to people, or you could buy your own business. And apparently it was very expensive for him because he had to basically take on the debt of the people he had extended credit to, along with just purchasing the route, so to speak. And so he did that. He said he felt, he couldn't just drop people like that and because a lot of people at that time, of course, living over there, a lot of people were on welfare,
Mhm.
food stamps and all of that stuff. So my dad was a very good man, very kind-hearted, very generous.
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm gonna get choked up here.
Oh, no
Anyway,
worries. No
yeah,
worries.
yeah. But and so my dad actually came from Colorado. He was born in Colorado. My mom was from Texas.
Mm.
And it's kind of funny because my dad served in World War II,
Mhm.
and he was in the, I guess, it was back then, I believe, was of the Army Airborne. So he came home. He actually was from Colorado. His dad moved them to Utah because his dad was a miner.
Mm.
And so his on one of his times of, when they go to different posts, I should say, when he went to one of his posts was in LA. So he came out this way for a little bit, loved California, fell in love with it,
Mhm.
and decided to move his whole family out to California at some point, So he had like 7 brothers and sisters, and his
Oh my gosh.
mom, and,
Yeah.
dad, everybody. So sure enough, after my dad, like I said, was a very hardworking man. He started moving the rest of his family out to California. And so all like his younger brothers and sisters, they ended up, going to school out here in East LA in Boyle Heights. And it was a very different, I guess, time, and mixture of people. There was a big mixture of people at that time. That's what my father-in-law says, is
Yeah.
that there was a very,
Was that in the
um,
50s or?
I believe it was in the 50s. Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
just after the war.
Mhm.
So probably like late 40s and then up through the 50s. Yeah. But apparently there was a much different mixture of people, kind of, German, Russian,
Yeah.
Jewish, Mexican, of course,
Yeah.
but
I understand
it
there
was
used to
kind of,
be East LA was a big Jewish neighborhood for a long
yeah,
time back in the day. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. In fact, my father
Mhm.
bought his business, deli, the delicatessen, from a Jewish family.
Mhm.
So, excuse me. Anyway, so the he moved his whole family out this way, and my aunts and everybody. In fact, I still had up until my last aunt passed away. She lived right there. I guess I don't know if you know where Concord is. Do you have
Yeah.
any?
Yes.
She
Yeah.
lived in
Yeah.
Concord. So
Mhm.
anyway, that side of the family, it's kind of funny because her children, they're all very political,
Mhm.
and but they're on the opposite side of the spectrum. They're
Yeah.
we have opposing views, and it's kind of funny. But yeah, that side of the family, they're from what I understand, I have a couple of cousins who were judges, and they served on this board and that board, and I don't know what, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. But
Yeah.
anyway, so that's my father.
Mhm.
My mother um was had a very difficult childhood. Her mother passed away when, well, her father is a very interesting story. her father was married 3 times, and each time his wife passed away, through, women died back then, of course, a lot younger and sometimes in childbirth.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, my mom's mom died from the flu or something. I don't recall, but she died when my mom was like 2 or 3 years old.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And my grandfather, what basically what it was her was my mom, her sister, and her brother. And her sister was, of course, younger than her. And so they're all, like maybe 5, 3, and maybe 2 or 1. And so my my grandfather had to, pay somebody to take care of them because he was, I guess he worked on farms and ranches and that kind of thing. And so he couldn't stay home with them and take care of them and feed them. A lot of different days. This is during the Depression. And so my father, I'm sorry, my mom, she has some interesting stories of what she said one time they had a thing where people were literally starving.
Mhm.
And she said that the she was told, go get some government, go come and get some cheese or whatever. So I guess the government was giving away cheese.
Yes, yes.
And anyway, she said it was a big, like, round cheese, and she said she was really excited because she was bringing home this cheese to her grandmother.
Mm.
And this is later, and they kind of just like rolled it in the dirt because they were little by the time, and their grandmother's like, "What is this?"
Mhm.
But it's kind of funny. But my mom grew up. Afterwards, her aunt, I guess, found out that the people that were supposedly taking care of her and her brother and sister were really not doing a very good job.
Mm.
And so they told their mom, that which is my maternal grandmother, that you know uh, something had to be done. And so they went ahead and got my mom and her brother and sister, and my great grandmother began to raise them.
Mm.
So, um, and she was a very strict disciplinarian, which is where my mom gets it from.
Mm.
You don't take anything from your kids. I mean, I see what kids do nowadays and how they talk to their parents, and oh no, you never would have gotten away, with any of that when we were kids. And so yeah, so that's basically the story. My mom moved. Actually, what happened is that when she said she prayed because my grandmother, when she was, I guess, like 17, 16, 17, um, that my grandmother had a stroke.
Mm.
And she and her sister took care of her grandmother. And I believe at this time, my uncle, this is during World War II.
Mhm.
So my uncle was overseas, I believe, he was in the Navy. Um, and so he was serving, I guess, I think he was in the Japanese side of the war. But
Mm.
anyway, so my mom and her sister would have had really nothing if my grandmother passed away. So my mom said she prayed and she asked God to uh, keep their grandmother alive at least until she was 18, so that she could legally take care of her sister. And God was gracious and allowed her grandmother to live. And anyway, so that was basically the story. And then later on, I believe what happened is that she decided her cousins had moved to California, and they were in the like the farming industry. And so they said, come on out, there are lots of jobs here. So my mom said, okay, they went, and my mom said that she moved, and she had a couple of different jobs. One was working as a nanny. She said she and her sister worked in a canning factory. She said that at one time they even went out and picked, crops and stuff. And that she ended up getting into nursing. So anyway, long story, I'm really talking about my parents, but they influenced my life.
Oh, totally.
But
Yeah, that's your
yeah,
origin story. I mean, that's that really forms who you are as a person, I think. So, yeah,
yeah.
it's fascinating.
So
Wow.
my mom had the opportunity to go into nursing school, and so
Hmm.
she went into nursing school, and she had some really neat stories to tell about the Jewish doctors
Hmm.
back in those days, and how she worked for some of those uh, hospitals and clinics out in East LA, and whatever. And so that's, I believe, she met her my father at a dance, and and that was it. My dad was, like I said, he was a hard worker, but he was a very, he was a humble kind of a guy. But he liked nice things. And I remember my mom telling me that my dad offered her and her sister or whatever a ride home, or no, offered her a ride home, and he had a sister with her. So it was kind of, things were different back in those days, and my mom was with her sister or whatever. So he offered her a ride, and he said, "Oh, um, just meet me out in front, and I'll go get my jalopy." Is what he called it. I'll get
Yeah.
my jalopy. I'll be right there. And so my mom said she went outside, and my dad pulled up in a brand new Cadillac. Kind of a,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
So my mom was like, "What is this? Is interesting." So anyway, they started, dating or talking, and they eventually got married. It took them a while though. It took them
Mhm.
about, I guess they were engaged for like ever. It was like 6 years they were engaged,
Oh, wow.
and
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, they're good people that had good values,
Hmm.
strong Catholics, and that's pretty much what the influences that I had.
Hmm.
Went to Catholic school, and that is a really they provided me with a very good education. I would say the Catholic schools I went to, St. Thomas Aquinas out in Monterey Park,
Hmm.
and they provided a great education. I mean, a lot of what I do in terms of writing or uh, speaking or thinking or math, a lot of it actually goes back to those formative years.
Hmm.
Remember, I don't know if you ever had to diagram sentences for English.
Um,
Did
I,
you
I,
ever have to do that?
I, I can't remember. Yeah, I'm sure I probably did. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, but we were taught, how to break down sentences in English, grammatically correct,
Mm.
verbs, adverbs, adjectives, everything had its place, and
Yes.
you had to know where that place was. So, um, it was it we knew so much more about the language that we were supposed to be, utilizing. We knew uh, all of those things, and those things are not being passed on to our children nowadays. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even penmanship is not a thing anymore. I mean, most kids don't know how to write in cursive and that kind of thing, which is kind of crazy.
yeah,
I mean, my cursive is terrible, but I can do it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's actually, from what I understand, just recently they put that back into the system here. I believe that children are going to be learning cursive again,
Mm.
which is, I think, is a fantastic thing. Where kids are not learning, like you said, they're not learning how to write. They're not learning, and it's actually bad for their mental development. Is, I believe, also what they're learning, that children learn when they actually write things down. So,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
I
So
agree.
anyway, yeah. So I learned a lot. My foundation is really there. back in those formative years, I learned about English, I learned grammar, and that pretty much carried me through. I got married when I was 21, had a daughter with my husband, and we stayed married for a while, and I won't talk about that marriage. But what happened was that we ended up divorcing, and I had met my husband. We were all just friends, just a group of friends. But anyway, so he was kind of like within my circle of friends, but we weren't close friends or anything like that. And but about maybe 4 years later, it's like, we kind of became interested in one another at that time. And I remember my friend telling me, "You better watch that guy."
That's funny.
I could tell he has his eyes on you. So it was just kind of funny. But yeah, so my husband and I, got together. And it was funny. I used to host Scrabble parties at my house. And people would come over and we would play board games, and Scrabble was our big thing. We would have like Scrabble parties that lasted till like 3-4 o'clock in the morning. I mean,
wow.
we are hardcore Scrabble players, and of course it was mostly people like from church and things like that. So the younger set, and so it was very nice, fun, innocent kind of fun. And yeah, so that's what we did. And then so we got married, and we have 2 children together. He's a Navy veteran, and throughout the years I worked in, let's see, my first job I worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I wasn't very good at it. And then a friend of mine got me a job working summers. It was actually through some sort of a government program to try to get children, or I shouldn't say children, but kids, to get them like a job where they could learn about how to work. And so I got a job working as a parks and recreation aide. And so I worked over this summer. It was a lot of fun. That was one of my most fun summers that I ever recall having. So I worked at that summer job, and then that led me to another job with the government. And so I worked for the U.S. Geological Survey, and then I worked for the Internal Revenue Service for a number of years. And my first husband hated the IRS, wanted me to quit. And so with the birth of my daughter, I did quit, And then I started going to school, because I had always in my mind thought I was going to go to college. I was going to finish up school. And I'm sorry, I'm in my car, so I'm going to turn on my car for a little bit. It's getting warm in here.
No worries.
It's football Sunday, so it gets loud in my house. So anyway, the I started going back to school.
Yes.
And I went to junior college, and then I was going to transfer, of course, to a 4-year. And so I was working part-time during this, going to school or working at Edison. So I worked at Edison at the same time. And my dad passed away right before, or about 6 months before I graduated. And then I transferred. I went to Loyola Marymount, and I went there for a couple of years. But it's really strange because my education has taken many years to complete, to finally, get to where, okay, I think I've had enough education. But it's I've been able to see kind of like the phases that our educational system has gone through and how it has actually changed over the years. And what I hear and see right now in our educational system, and types of students and thinking that these students are coming out with, it's very different from when I was in school. I mean, I've seen a gradual sort of progression, so to speak. I think a lot of the more leftist, communist, socialist values were not so out there in the open as they are now. If some of those professors had those views or opinions or ideals, they didn't basically force them on their students. It was kind of, I would say, you know, I don't know, how would you say? I would just say that they kind of painted capitalism a little negatively in that, it didn't take care of everybody. So it's just a different mindset than a lot of our professors have right now. And unfortunately, this is what happened with Loyola. I didn't graduate. I had like 2 classes, and that's when my divorce happened, or right before my divorce happened. So I had to get a full-time job, and I had to, uh, basically support myself and my daughter. So my education stopped, and I went to work, and then when I went back to school to finish my degree, Loyola had somewhat changed, now this is a Catholic university, and I think a lot of parents, when they're sending their children off to a Catholic university, think, they're going to get a Catholic education. That means moral, that means they're going to have that, priests and nuns and that kind of thing. And so when I went back to Loyola, I found it had I only took 2 classes because that's what I needed to graduate. One was an upper division arts history class, and the other one was an upper division political science class, I believe is what it was. And so I took the courses, and they're both very, very nice people. But the first one was a definite socialist on the political spectrum. The other one was actually an atheist. And so actually the other socialist was also an atheist or agnostic, whatever, but neither of them believed in God. Now these are people teaching at a Catholic university, a Catholic institution. I didn't get it, but it was very interesting to see that dynamic in there. I knew that. I mean, you do have Jesuits at that school, and I believe some Jesuits have a history of being social justice kind of people, which is really socialism mixed with religion. And I think more so, though, that like the left has taken religion out of it. But that was back in South America, that was kind of used to take over the minds and the hearts of a lot of people. They infused religion with communism, socialist values. So anyway, and the whole thing with Marx. Okay, this is what I remember. I studied Marx a little bit, and it's funny because I remember thinking, okay, I need to understand this, and if I think this way over here, I need to understand why I think this way.
Yes, yeah.
Open-minded.
I agree. I think that no matter what your beliefs are, they only matter if you can defend them, which means that you have to try and understand what the other people are thinking or what their point of view is. And unfortunately, there's not enough of that these days, enough debate. People just shout each other down instead of listening to each other and having a debate. I mean, there used to be shows with debates in the 70s and the 60s, And I mean, for kids like us, they were boring, but basically they talked about this stuff, you know. Now you don't see any discussion. There's just one side. If you're watching, I mean, all the TV news stations are biased in one way or another, but if you're watching one side, then you see that. And then if you're watching the other side, you see the other, but you don't see a lot of discussion and debate. And I think that that's necessary with everything that happens, you know, with all the decisions they made during the pandemic that affected all of our lives. None of us got a chance to vote on them and to decide how we wanted to determine our own lives. It was all just mandated from on high. And I think that that's what concerns me. I'm kind of, I lean both ways depending on the issue.
Right.
But I'm totally anti-authoritarian. I don't want the government to tell me how to live. And I
Yeah.
believe in freedom, and I believe in freedom of speech. I think that's hugely important, and I think that's going away. You know, a lot of people are being silenced. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Keep going with
No,
your
I
yeah.
love hearing your side. I think that's fantastic. It's so good to know, that I'm not the only one who thinks this way, It's like,
Mm,
okay, I think that, like, let's say, for example, uh welfare. Okay.
mm,
I think it's great to have a social safety net, you know, it's good, but it shouldn't be something that you become accustomed to and become a weight on the rest of society, unless you're disabled, unless there's something that there's you cannot contribute, to society as a whole. I don't think it's right that the rest of people who are working, uh, that they should have to support somebody who just doesn't feel like going to work. I mean, I've talked to people
mhm,
who during this uh, pandemic, they and they're good people, right? But they took advantage of the unemployment benefits. I mean, I know people that said, I don't really feel like working right now, so I'm just gonna, I'm not really looking for a job. I could be on unemployment for another 6 months.
mhm,
And that's what they did. They just, you and I,
mhm.
um, and just continued to collect benefits until they ran out. And there's nothing wrong with them, but that's what we have right now, is a lot of people that are taking advantage of the system. And it shouldn't be like that. It should be for people when they really need it, Um, I remember one time I really, really, really needed it. I mean, I wasn't working. My husband had lost his job, and it was one of those things where I think, you know, it was at one point when, at least of my parents, I guess, they kind of instilled in me, is that it's an embarrassment to have to go and ask for help. You stand on your own 2 feet, you do what you have to do, and you support yourself. You don't lean on other people. And that's one of the, I think, the work ethics that Americans have had for many, many years. Um, and to some degree, yeah, it could be taken to to an extreme, which is not good. You don't want your family to starve because you're too proud, right, to get benefits, kind of, or to ask for help.
Right.
But
Yeah.
there was that American pride, or pride, and when I say American, I don't mean white Caucasian American. I mean American is, it's a system of belief. It's a way that we think,
Hmm.
uh, um,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
we have adopted. Like, we're all adopted into this American family. So
Mhm.
maybe me being adopted has, I cannot kind of understand. My parents adopted me. They didn't have to take me,
Yeah.
and we don't, as Americans, as who have come to this country, we came here because we wanted to.
Hmm.
We came here because we thought this is a better way of life, and thinking and believing, and prospering and freedom and all of that. My family's father, I should say, my family's my dad's family was originally from Mexico from many, many years ago. My dad's like second or third generation, born here. Same thing for my mom. So it's one of those things where, what I don't understand is people coming to this country and then hating it, hating on America. That's what I don't understand. I think, well, if you're here, embrace it. Embrace America for what it is. There's still so many people that are trying to get in, I guess the problem our border shows you.
Yes.
They know that there's opportunity here. And I think it's really strange. That's one of the things that it's very interesting to me is that as Americans who've been here first and second generations, it's funny because I don't think that we really see the opportunities that are here. I think people who
I think a lot of Americans don't understand what the rest of the world is going through and living through because, only I think it's 30% of Americans even have passports. So the majority of Americans don't leave America ever. And if you don't do that, you don't really understand. It's like a lot of things. You don't know how good you have it until you lose it, and then you realize it, I mean, I grew up in the suburbs in Claremont. I was born in Spain and I lived there as well. But out here, we grew up in Claremont.
I was gonna ask you, yeah. I was gonna ask you, where did that Spanish come from?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because my dad had a scholarship to study in Spain, and my mom was pregnant, so he took her, and I was born there. But he's from Dallas. He's from Texas, and my mom's from upstate New York. But I'm very connected to Spain. I go back, and my co-host of this show is actually half Spanish and half American as well. But he's more Spanish because he lived his whole life there until just a few years ago. And our audience is mostly Spanish because of that, I lived in the suburbs in Claremont, which is a very nice college town. And, as when I was young, all I could think about was getting out, because I wanted to be on my own and do stuff. And then I realized how nice it was after I moved out, because then I was like, well, I can't afford to move back now. It's too expensive for me, and often I think we don't realize that. We don't realize how nice things are here until we go to another country, or and there are beautiful things about every country. Every country has its beauty and its values, and I look at countries more by the people than the governments, because most governments have a lot of problems, including ours. I don't, if I complain about what our government is doing, I'm not complaining about American people. I love American people. I'm complaining about the government because, they, like I said, they don't always ask our permission for the things that they do. Now, I know that you only have about an hour, so you don't have much more time. I wanted to know a couple things about the assembly, because I talked to a candidate for the assembly out here in the 53rd district last week, and I asked him what an assemblyman really does, because I get Congress and I get senators, so they draft legislation. Is that what it is?
Yes, we were. You know how the Congress, you have the House of Representatives and you have the state Senate. Well, we have the same structure in California. The state assembly is the congressional or the House of Representatives side. And then, we have the state Senate side. So, that's how it works.
Okay. And
the problem in California,
go ahead. You go ahead. Yeah.
The problem, one of the interesting things about our form of government here in the United States and in California is that we have this balanced way of government. Like, you have the governor, you have the courts, you have Congress, and the state Senate. So you have all of these things that help to balance out each other so that no section is able to have too much power at one time. there's a kind of a balance, uh, where people have to um, kind of come together, whether, both parties, they have to work things out. They have to compromise. Well, you want this, okay, well, okay, we'll help you pass this, but you have to help us pass this, kind of a thing. So you have this thing, a structure where there's compromise, there's negotiation, that one party doesn't have it all, even if they're in power or have the majority. They still have to give some to get some, in order to, in a manner of speaking. But we have right now, unfortunately, somehow it happened, and I believe it's the fault of, well, I don't want to criticize my party, but I believe that it is my party's fault. They were not reaching out enough to the Hispanic voters here in California over the years. I think that was one of their main mistakes. They kind of felt, I believe, they kind of said, well, a lot of people that are Democrats, they're never going to switch over to a Republican way of thinking. And so they kind of just said, okay, well, we'll look for these other populations. I think that, and I wasn't political back then, when, years ago. It's just been the last maybe 6 years. But getting back to our government, what has happened right now is that you have one party that controls everything. They control the governorship. They have not just a majority, but they have super majorities in both houses, meaning that if there's a super majority, or if there's a majority, that means that they likely are going to have to compromise back and forth, to get some of their legislation passed. With the super majority, there is nothing the opposition power or the opposition party can do. They have absolute control over the House. There aren't enough people to do anything, So that's one of the problems right now, is that you have one party in complete control. There's no compromise. There's no reasoning with the other side. So we're getting things like tampons in the boys' bathroom, those types of things that people are going, hey, that makes no sense to me. Why do boys need tampons? And of course, we know why they do, but they're not really boys, but they're. Anyway, so we're getting all these different types of legislation that Californians, on the whole, would look at and say that makes no sense. Like, I think AB 5 that hurt a lot of people who were self-employed contractors and drove a lot of jobs and businesses out of California. We have extremely high taxes. I believe we have the highest taxes in the nation right now. And it's hurting the people who can least afford it. Remember when they first proposed that 25 cents gas tax? And I remember going around and talking to different people about it. And some of them, see, this is the thing, is a lot of the people who are still, are ever shrinking middle class. They're but they're on the Democrat side. And I would talk to them and say, but don't you see that this 25-cent gas tax hurts the people who can least afford it? You claim, you say that you want to help people who are poor, who can't afford it. But yet you're raising their gas tax too if you vote for this. And 25 cents to you if you're making $150, $150,000 a year or something, or so, or maybe more. It doesn't hurt you, but it hurts them. Because you're talking about a much larger piece of their income than a middle class, so to speak, person. So taxing people out of California is basically what Governor Newsom and the state Senate and the House has been doing basically.
Yeah,
So
and
that's
now
what my
there's like the housing is basically impossible. It's impossible unless you're a millionaire to get a house in California. So young couples are basically out of luck unless they want to move out of state or very
right.
far. I assume maybe in the desert there are some places maybe that you could go, but then you have to live out there, and how are you going to make a living?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's tricky. I know a lot of businesses have left, and I've kind of shifted my view about taxes a lot, partly because, I'm happy to do my part if
sure.
if you get something back from it, if you see the results of your taxes, but we have roads with potholes that are falling apart, bridges falling apart. We don't have universal health care. They pay very high taxes in Europe, but they get a lot more bang for their buck. We don't
Right.
really see a lot coming back to the people to help the people, and that concerns me because that goes back to the foundations of our country with taxation
I'm
without
sorry.
representation. Oh, no worries, no worries. Yeah, taxation without representation, because our taxes end up going to things that we didn't even vote on, like wars and that kind of thing, and that concerns me. So what would you say your main platform is, or what are you fighting for?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch what you just said. It my Zoom broke up.
Oh, okay. Well, I said prior that I really feel that the taxation, since it goes to things that we don't necessarily get to vote on, like wars and things like that, and then it really becomes taxation without representation, which goes against the foundations of our country. Um, and but I wanted to ask you what are the platforms that you really feel that you need to fight for as an assembly person?
Right. Well, I think one of the key things that really, really, really need to be addressed is crime.
Mhm.
Crime affects everyone in our communities, in our state at large. It's affecting our businesses. People are afraid to open up a business. Um, and even if they get past their fear of opening up a business, they actually open one, then they are subjected, if they have, a storefront, they're subjected to break-ins. I was just at a press conference and supporting a new bill that's coming out. I'm on the city council in the city of Whittier. And so as our city council, the city of Whittier, we went out to support uh, a bill that's being proposed by Bob Archuleta, who is a Democrat, by the way. It's SB 923, and it's a way of addressing repeat offenders who are taking advantage of, the 950 and below. You can steal all you want and
Yes,
never
yeah,
go to jail, kind of a thing.
yeah.
So anyway, he got together with Todd Spitzer, who's a DA for Orange County, and they basically came up with some legislation, and so they're going to try to get that through our legislature and hopefully get it signed off. It's kind of like an amendment to Prop 47 that we, as Californians, I believe, were kind of duped into voting for, because everyone is for safety in our communities and bettering our communities. We weren't really aware that we were letting out and keeping out and not uh, putting criminals where they belong. So we voted this in, we brought this upon ourselves, so to speak. And now we have DAs like Gascon,
Mhm.
who is terrible for our communities. And so crime is the number one issue that we need to deal with. People who have no fear anymore of being arrested, they know it's just,
Slap on the
they're just
wrist,
going to
yeah.
get a little slap on the wrist.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm thinking about people, neighborhoods. I used to feel very, very safe, my neighborhood. And we have to lock everything up now. You can't just leave things out. I used to leave my door open. I know it sounds crazy.
Yeah. That's the way I grew up. We would have we would lock the doors at night before we went to bed, but otherwise we just have them open. And
Right.
I know that I work in downtown LA, and I've seen, the Rite Aid's closed, the Walgreens is closed. Most of the Starbucks have left. So it's really affecting not only the small businesses, but even the chains. The chains are pulling out of the big cities because otherwise they have to lock everything up. They have to put your, deodorant behind glass, and then you have to ask for it for them to unlock it, or, any things that are not even that expensive, but it's like they know that people will come in and just fill their bags and walk out. And it's crazy. I just saw a report about a young man. I don't think it was in California, but I'm not sure who worked at Starbucks, and he was robbed and he was pistol whipped, and he defended himself along with somebody else, helped him, because at first they thought they were going to die, but then they saw that the gun wasn't real. So then they subdued the guy, but he ended up getting fired from Starbucks for doing that, because they said that went against policy. But at that, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, well, now it's the law, I believe, that employees are not supposed to fight back against someone who comes in. They're supposed to just stand aside and allow somebody to rob them blind, basically. I believe is, I could be wrong on this, but I believe it's already been written into our law, that these are some of the things that our legislature has done, has said, we're not going to allow our employees to do that anymore. You just have to allow people to just rob you. And so it's this complete upside down thing going on in California, and people are, for the first time, very, very safe areas of our town people are experiencing break-ins, which never used to happen. I lived here, my husband and I have been living here in Whittier for over 20 years, same place. So we've seen, nobody ever experienced anything like that. And then just maybe in the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen things happen, and dynamics and that have come into the city, although not on such a large scale as maybe other places, because one of the things that we do have in our city is a fully staffed police force. They know the community cares about them and supports them. So we actually don't have a problem getting police on our force here in Whittier, because we know we're going to keep them on. So anyway, getting back to my platform. So crime, I believe, is number one. Education, obviously, that is number two. That we really have to address how we're turning students out. Kids, I'm sorry, my iPhone holder here. Kids, the Common Core did a lot of damage to our children. I had a first grade teacher friend, veteran teacher, taught for like 20 odd years, first grade. So she's an expert. She said when Common Core came about and they asked teachers to teach it, she and her fellow first grade teachers, they didn't understand it themselves. We're talking about college level expert teachers, and they had to be taught how to teach it because they couldn't unravel it. And I think when I first came into contact with this curriculum myself, it's very, very difficult, and I believe it's intentional. This is what I think. This is my, call me conspiracy theorist, but I believe it's intentional. that parents look stupid in the eyes of their children because the children will say, Mom, Dad, can you help me with this problem? And mom and dad can't help them because they don't understand how the teacher wants them to do it. It makes no sense to go, I mean, 2 and 2 plus 4, but they're giving you 9 more steps to get there, in Common Core curriculum. Whereas, we learn straight math, 2 times 4 is 8, and it doesn't change. And you've learned certain principles in math, in English, and just all of these different things that prepare you for the rest of your life. That's why I think, getting back to my, when I grew up, we were taught certain things, but those things have, those were the things that I needed to know. I mean, I could have left, I think, junior high school and worked for the rest of my life based on what I already learned in 1 through 8.
Mm-hmm.
That's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's so that's another thing. I think our children are being shortchanged, and I'll say, this is another thing having to do with our educational system. We have been miseducated historically, on our history lessons. We haven't been told the absolute truth about the founding of the United States, about our founding fathers. I found out just recently that, okay, I was raised, I don't know if this was your understanding of history, but I remember it being pounded into me that our founding fathers, those who wrote the Constitution of the United States, who signed the Declaration of Independence, that they were they didn't believe in a Christian concept of God. They believed that God was some sort of a clock or a being who wound the universe up and basically tossed this clock out and just let it spin. And they weren't, what do they call those people? Do you have it on the top of your tongue? Because it just slipped my...
Puritans, or I'm not sure. They weren't
during
atheists.
the Enlightenment.
Yeah.
No, they weren't atheists. They were sort of agnostics, but they believed in a different concept of God. They weren't Christian, is what I was taught. Is that they believed in this kind of an alternate theory of who God was. And what I've come to find out is that except for 4 people who signed the Declaration of Independence, every single one of the founders were Christians.
Yes. Yeah.
Every single one except for 4.
Mm-hmm.
I was taught exactly the opposite, that all of them, for the most part, were all this other mindset. And so you look further and further at, the founding of our country. We were founded on the Judeo-Christian ethics. Our law was based upon the 10 Commandments. You don't steal. Those are, you shouldn't commit adultery.
Right.
Certain things that we our law and our
didn't kill, and bear false witness, which I think is a huge one, and I don't think that's held up to enough value today either, because people bear false witness all the time. They'll claim something and ruin somebody else's life, and it's a lie, and then it comes out later, and often they don't really have any consequences for that, and that's something I think is a sin. I don't really, I try not to look at things in terms of sins or blessings, but at the same time, I think there are crimes that are crimes against humanity, which things like murdering someone, rape, theft is on a lower scale, but yeah, it's a problem as well. and lying where you're ruining someone else's life with the lie, and that happens a lot. And often if somebody's reputation gets destroyed, they never get it back, and they can't get jobs. They can't get, people can get drummed out of an industry because of something that somebody says about them, and I think that's terrible. Anyway, that's just my point of view. I want to know about you. I'm sorry. I keep blathering on.
No, I can entirely agree with you, because if we just enforce some of those laws against perjury, or against defamation or libel, people would stop doing some of these things. I mean, to be able to go to court and lie to the judge and to jurors and to not have any consequences. And I'll say this, I think it's very important who our leaders are. And at that, I remember the first time I think that it was really blasted to the American public. One of the things that really influenced in our culture and our young people in a very negative way was Bill Clinton. When he was caught with the whole Monica Lewinsky scandal, and he stood up and basically lied to everybody and said, I didn't do anything with, that woman, or whatever it was exactly he said.
Well, he manipulated too, because he said, I did not have sex with that woman, but he didn't consider oral sex. And I don't know. It was all that was during the time when they were also saying, like, define the word the. So they were playing games with definitions. And then there were so many jokes about her. She was really victimized more than anything. It was all about her being a joke when she was a young intern who was taken advantage of by her boss, and that wasn't talked about, and her reputation was ruined. She did something, I mean, of course, with sexuality, we have a lot of jokes and especially, the act that took place and that kind of thing. But that's something that pretty much everybody does in the privacy of their own home with their own loved ones, with their own partner. But I'm sure it damaged her personal life. It damaged her professional life. And she's still going through it to a certain extent today. And it's sad, because she shouldn't have been attacked for this, and she was betrayed too, because she told somebody in confidence what had happened, and they were recording the conversations, which, it depends on the state, but in a lot of states that's illegal as well, so it was, I felt that was really shameful. And I think my thinking changed over time too, because I think if I recall, because I was young then too, and I'm sure I chuckled over it when it first happened, because you hear about it and you chuckle, but thinking about it from her point of view, that had to have been a hugely difficult thing to go through, especially when you're that age, you're just starting off in your professional life, especially. And I'm sure she had high aspirations as an intern at the White House. That's a huge thing. She was probably hoping to move up in politics, and she really didn't get to do that. Now she's known and she's an author. But I agree with you there. I think that was a dark period where we left behind some of our values. And part of it was, I think we were, putting two things together weren't necessarily together, because a lot of young people and a lot of especially young people from all sides feel that the older generation is prudes. So they would say, well, why are you making such a big deal over this? He just got a BJ or whatever. It's like, but it's not that. That's not the issue. The issue is that he's a boss. She works for him. She's very young. He's older, which that doesn't necessarily matter, but he had power and she didn't have any power. That's my thought. Yeah. So, well,
Yeah, and
yeah, go ahead.
the thing is that I think a lot of Americans, or at least my younger people at that time, I think looked at him and thought it really affected the mentality of a lot of people, because they really saw that people in leadership really don't have any respect for the truth. And I think that really affected a lot of people. And I think we're now seeing the effects of that. I mean, I think it was kind of, we had a sitting president who basically lied to us, and it was proven. And I feel sorry for Monica Lewinsky, but that, I think, was the worst effect of what actually happened to us as a nation, is that all of a sudden we devalued what truth was and how important it is to our judicial system, and that as long as you don't get caught, it's okay. Just
Yeah.
just don't get caught. Do whatever it is you're going to do, but just don't get caught. And that's part of the mentality. And so integrity is sorely lacking in our mentality today, in the way people now, the ends is more, are the means, and the ends, nobody even considers that anymore. Do the ends justify the means? It's not, we should, we're not taught to try to have integrity in everything that we say and do anymore. And that is something, I think our public schools worked kind of hand in hand with parents and churches to try to mold future members of our society, because the truth is our form of government cannot survive a people that have no value for truth, for honor. If we do not value the Judeo-Christian way of thinking, our nation is not going to survive, because it was not constructed thinking that people, I mean, yeah, in a sense it is. There were things that were set in place so that we are able to govern despite people who don't have integrity. But on the whole, the American people were supposed to have integrity.
Yes.
In order to continue to allow our system of government, just like right now, don't get me started on election integrity. That's
right.
That's a whole other issue. But our election system is crazy. And you know what? I have actually, I stayed 60 minutes past what I was supposed to.
Oh,
but
yes.
real
Yeah.
quick,
Well, I want to thank you so much for being on here. And I want to thank Tom, your brother-in-law, for setting it up as well.
Yes.
And
Thank you, Tom.
shout out to him. Thank you, Tom. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. And I will be in touch. And the election is in March, correct?
Yes. The election is in March, and so I'm running for Assembly District 56. Those are all of the cities that are from kind of like on both sides of the 60 freeway, all the way down to where the 57 is. So we're talking about like Walnut, Roland Heights, those cities on that end, Diamond Bar, all the way over to Pico Rivera. So that's kind of my district. And so we really want to do good things for the people of California, things that make sense, things that are good for families, things that will be good for businesses. We need those businesses to come back to California so that we can have great jobs, so that we can have support our families, buy houses, those types of things. And so I think it's very, very important that we get business back on the ground right now. Okay, Forbes, we're like number 49 or 50, as far as the worst place to do business in the United States. We're at the bottom of the barrel. It's like our governor is making it so impossible for people to, this is very important. Okay, this is very, very important. For anybody who thinks that they might die and live, which is all of us, that we're going to die at some point and leave. Let's say you want to leave your house or your property, whatever your estate is, for your children, that they're going to try to pass a death tax. There's actually, I believe you go to Howard Jarvis. There's they're trying to pass a petition, right, to stop this death tax. So anyway, that's another thing for you or your listeners to investigate. But I really appreciate the fact that you had me on. I've really enjoyed our talk, and I hope we can do it again.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all our listeners. Muchísimas gracias por escucharnos esta tarde, esta mañana. Y hasta la próxima. Thank you. And we'll be in touch. Take care.
Thank you, Joe.